John F. Kennedy's assassination in Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963, left the nation in a state of shock and despair. Within hours of the tragedy, Kennedy's vice president was sworn into office aboard Air Force One. Number 36, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Democrat, 1963 to 1969, age 55, from Texas.
The greatest leader of our time has been struck down.
The day after the assassination, Johnson pledged to dedicate his presidency to the fulfillment of Kennedy's legacy. How well Johnson actually enacted Kennedy's presidential agenda was another matter. Johnson was not happy about the way he gained the presidency, but once he had it, there was much he wanted to do.
He was just insatiable about being a great politician. He wanted to be the greatest president in the country's history.
Johnson had risen from poverty to become a hugely powerful politician. He was a larger-than-life character, alternately charismatic and crass.
Oh, Lyndon Johnson, he was one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. He was cunning. It was kind of like being an animal in the jungle. He didn't read, he wasn't a scholar, but he just was so clever and so aware of people and what they did and so able to analyze them. And then he had this kind of volcanic personality, up and down. He was on certain days a little nuts.
He had a ego problem as big as his own hat. He felt inferior dealing with all these Ivy League people, and he occasionally overreacted to that and pushed these people around just to prove he could do it.
Johnson had an in-your-face management style. At 6'2", he overwhelmed people to get what he wanted. It became known as the Johnson treatment.
The Johnson treatment was getting in people's faces and bullying them, shouting them, bribing them, whatever, to get his own way.
And you didn't know whether it was a gesture of friendship or a gesture of trying to dominate. I think in Johnson it was both.
Besides the treatment, Johnson gained the upper hand by holding meetings in unconventional places. He was skinny dipping in the White House pool when he called for two of his aides to come and listen to his Great Society proposal. This was Johnson's vision of America, realizing its true promise, a democracy with freedom and justice for all.
And he believed wholeheartedly in this vision. It was to raise the underprivileged and the discriminated against to new levels of equality, if he could.
Johnson's Great Society resulted in an explosion of new laws. The Voting Rights Act, Medicaid, federal aid for education, environmental protection laws, food stamps, Head Start, National Public Radio, the Public Broadcasting System, consumer protection laws, and the Civil Rights Act.
No president wanted to do more for African Americans than Lyndon Johnson. Civil rights was absolutely at the core of his commitment to a better America, to a great society.
Lyndon Johnson's going to go down in history for one reason, and that's for civil rights.
Johnson also expanded on Kennedy's efforts to fight a war on poverty, and he succeeded, eventually cutting the percentage of those who lived in poverty by half. Winning the war in Vietnam, however, was another matter. In June 1965, General William Westmoreland warned Johnson that he risked losing the war unless he mobilized the reserves, committed more firepower, and doubled the troops from 65,000 to 125,000. Johnson authorized sending 100,000 more troops, but even then, America came no closer to winning the war.
How could it be, he kept asking, that these Vietnamese guerrillas, these guys running around the jungles in black pajamas, could stand up to American military power, to our superior firepower, our technology? This he couldn't fathom, couldn't quite square that with the reality.
At home, the anti-war movement gained momentum. What had started as Truman's containment policy was now Johnson's war.
I spoke to Mrs. Johnson about this, and she said he heard those protesters marching up and down in front of the White House, shouting, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" And it was a wound in his heart. He suffered terribly, she said, over the fact that so many boys were dying.
The enemy of freedom has chosen to make this year the decisive one.
The last year of Johnson's presidency began with the devastating Tet Offensive. The bold North Vietnamese advance on Saigon made victory look remote, perhaps impossible. At home, Johnson faced opposition within his own party from Robert Kennedy and Eugene McCarthy. Under fire, Johnson decided not to run for re-election.
Fellow Americans, I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Lyndon Johnson, I think, is the most tragic of all of our American presidents because no man fell from a higher pinnacle, and no man sought more not to be a war president.
At the end of his term, Johnson tried to negotiate peace with Vietnam, but failed.
I think Johnson's reputation will make a comeback. I think he will be seen as, if not a near great president, but pretty darn close to it. Because in the domestic realm, there is no president other than Franklin Roosevelt who achieved more than LBJ. I think in time, as this Vietnam issue fades somewhat, he'll be seen, I think, as a more effective president than he's been seen in recent years.
Johnson liked the soft drink Fresca so much that he had a soda fountain installed in the Oval Office that dispensed only Fresca.